Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode. I'm going to be going through all of my data for this past week, talk about what's on tap for, I guess, the rest of 2025, what my goals are, and talk you through all of my data. And then I've got a Q&A at the very end. So last week I had you all submit questions on Instagram. There were thousands of questions to choose from. I tried to go through and pick some fun and interesting ones to talk about. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about nutrition or training in general, stick around to the end of this video because your question might have been answered. So let's dive in and have a look at all of my data from this past week. Actually, you know what? Let's back up a few seconds. I just had all of my wisdom teeth out like 3 days ago. So Friday afternoon, I went in at like 1 o'clock to have my teeth pulled. I'm going to be getting either like Invisalign or some kind of bracer. I've been wanting to do this for so long. In fact, I started doing it back in 2020 and I ended up getting like the little retainer that you put in and my teeth had gotten nice and straight. I think I'd been doing it for like maybe 4 months. And then the location that I went and got my retainers, one of them cracked during COVID. And they were closed and I could not go back in. And after however many weeks it had been since I hadn't been using my retainer, I was like, nah. And then I just totally didn't go back in. Time is of the essence and it was no longer a priority and I couldn't fit it. So I had started the process of straightening my teeth a few years ago and just kind of let it go. So I'm finally getting back in to do that and realizing now I should have also just had my wisdom teeth out then. So yeah, I had to fast up until 1 o'clock, which was when my surgery was. And instead of doing like a full anesthesia, I did like a heavily sedated version, I guess, in chair at the orthodontist office. And so many people have told me all these horror stories about, you know, how they felt after their teeth were out and that, you know, obviously no exercise, nothing strenuous for a week. And I was just anticipating the worst and I was expecting the worst kind of pain. And surprisingly, it has not been that bad. I have an antibiotic that I'm taking. They prescribed me multiple different like pain medications, but I'm only taking the ibuprofen. They gave me another like stronger opioid and I was like, oh, I don't feel like it's that bad to take that. So I've just been having 600 milligrams of ibuprofen. And they give you like I guess a mouthwash to kind of do a couple of times a day after you've eaten food. And things are going okay so far, but I'm like waiting for the dry socket that apparently everybody gets when they have their wisdom teeth out. But so far so good, touch wood. But definitely no exercise since Friday, at least no intense like lifting, that's for sure. And I'll make sure that I don't start training until probably Friday this week. So that's been an interesting few days, but oh my gosh, it was a welcomed change. I haven't really taken a whole lot of time out of the gym, at least since finishing my shows. So it was nice to have the whole weekend off, not doing any training, just kind of, I don't know, lounging around. And I'm not a very good lounger, I've realized. I think I'd like to be busy. You guys have probably heard me mention before, I have ADD, so I think my mind is constantly going and I really enjoy like keeping my mind busy. I love working on projects. I like being creative and I don't like being bored. So I will usually fill in the time and it's usually with the stuff that I'm passionate and interested about. And that is generally like nutrition or training. So yeah, this past weekend was a slower weekend. I think I got through like 2 seasons of The Chosen. For anyone who has watched that, you probably know all about that series. But I was able to kind of get caught up on that as I had not watched it previously. And I don't know, I feel like I just got things done that I wouldn't usually do on the weekends. I did a recipe, which is coming to you guys. It'll probably be up online by now. When you're seeing this, it was like a Biscoff cheesecake bar. So I made that on the weekend, which I haven't done like a fun, you know, recipe in a little while. So that's now floating around somewhere on my website as a recipe download. So go and grab that. But yeah, I am going to be taking it easy this week. But let's go and have a look at my data. So you can see I still did track after the Tampa Pro. So looking to my screen here, I'm kind of highlighting over here in column H my recent competition. So I did continue to track after my show. I wanted to do that because I feel like in previous shows, I've never really given myself an opportunity to kind of come out of it successfully in terms of calories. It's kind of been, you know, all in, rigid tracking, very low calorie tracking, lots of training. And then I'll normally kind of just throw myself back into work, which I still did, but I wanted to make a point this time and I was very intentional about continuing to track my macros. So I didn't want to set really hard limits or anything super restrictive in that week, just because it's been such a stressful and busy time. But I wanted to stay accountable to my food choices. So for that week, I got 6 out of 7 days tracked, which is great. And my average calories were 1717. So a sight higher than where I had been, around that 1200 calorie mark for like the last several weeks leading up to that show. So that just felt like, every after every meal, I was always looking at my numbers going, I must be close to being all done for the day. And I would obviously pleasantly surprised every time I'm like, oh, I'm at 1700. Is that all? Or a couple of days here, you can see I had, was it 2100 calories on Thursday evening, 1900 calories on was it Wednesday? One of these 2 days here. I'm trying to work out what line that is. Thursday and Friday. Yeah, slightly high calories. And I think that's just because I had some delicious cookies that I still hadn't gotten around to eating. And we taste tested all of them. They were so yummy. Little bite of each of them. They were delicious. So, my average calories didn't come out too bad. My protein is a little bit lower, but, after having basically the entire year in kind of prep focus mode and really being persistent and consistent with my protein intake, a couple of weeks, slightly lower numbers. Again, I'm still like pretty close to 90% compliant here. I'm not going to beat myself up for that. I'm still getting in, somewhere between 90 and 126 grams based on this number here. So protein was a little bit lower. You can see my fiber still came in around 22, which is fine. Yes, I'd probably like to see it a little bit higher, but I was also kind of itching to try like some just fun foods that are a little bit more calorically dense that week. So I know we went and had like Philly cheesesteaks. I had some pizza. I know we had mozzarella sticks. What else did we try? I think I had a big poke bowl, which was just calorically more dense than what I was used to, with like all of the like brown rice instead of just cauliflower rice and things like that. We went out and had pasta. We've been out and had a cocktail or two. Oh my goodness, just lots of fun things. So I'm going to put up all of those videos and pictures as I'm kind of just talking through today, so you can see what some of the delicious things that I've had just over the last 2 weeks since kind of wrapping up. And to be honest, it's not a whole lot different to what I was doing during prep. It's just the quantities are a little bit larger now, and I don't have to be so diligently like tracking every bite to make sure that I hit my targets perfectly. So that first week after my show, we come over and have a look here on the training side of things. My energy expenditure was still quite high. So I had 4,000 calories tracked energy expenditure. I still did my 2 runs. This is fun to me. Like, I'm really enjoying my running, and to be able to do it with calories and energy in the tank now, it's been really good. So I'm really enjoying my running. And I know somebody had some questions about running and muscle growth, which I'll answer again at the end in the Q&A, but that's been really fun. Still got lots of walking in. I think that's just kind of almost habitual. And again, I wanted to kind of stay somewhat active just so I didn't go from one extreme to the other, just to keep some of those habits and slowly kind of make my way back down to what I think will be more realistic for me over the next week or two. I got 3 lifting sessions in. I didn't push myself to get that 4th one in. My goal right now for training is really to do one thing intentionally every day. So whether that's 60 minutes of walking or a short run and a walk, so maybe 1 hour total of exercise, or a lifting session, but not all of them, that's for sure. So just to stay healthy, still to keep working towards my lifting goals, my hypertrophy goals. I'll still do my 4 training sessions a week, but I'm not going to put the pressure on myself to do a run and a lift and a resistance training session. It'll be just get something done, each day if I can. And there may be days where I'm not able to squeeze it in just because of work commitments. So my average steps was back down at 10,500 for that first week after show, which I'm still very happy with. And then if we come down to this most last 7-day or recent 7-day period, I pulled myself back onto the scale just to kind of see where I was at. And 3 of those weigh-ins came in that 131 range, which was interesting to me because when I looked in the mirror, it felt so much higher than that. But the reason was what I was looking at was a very inflamed not necessarily inflamed, I'm using the wrong term, high total body water. I was very fluidy, very swollen because of the types of foods that I was having that week. So like I said, we had the Philly cheesesteaks, we had mozzarella sticks, we had some pizza, are just some fun foods that are so salty. I would have to guess that my sodium intake was probably 3 times what it normally would be. I also had the poke bowls, so you can imagine like coconut aminos and the sweet aiolis, spicy mayo, things like that. Just way more salt. So I remember looking in the mirror and thinking, oh my goodness, like I'm going to guess I'm 135 today. And then I'd hop on the scale and I was still 131. I'm like, interesting. Okay. And I could also see it in my eyes, you know, when you get like the hooded lids, when you've had a little bit more salt than you might normally, or a bad night's sleep, one or the other, or you've been crying. So I could see a lot of those kind of subjective symptoms, but I was like, okay, well, you've done a really great job, you know, this first week coming out of your show. You're still lifting, you've still showed up and tracked most of the days, and you're just trying to find some balance. Like, give yourself some grace. So that's what I did this past week. So coming into the weekend, well, Friday, you can see this was the day that I had my surgery, which, by the way, as I'm talking now and trying to sound words out, it's actually a little harder than I thought. Yeah, I came in at 748 calories on that day, and that was partly because you have to fast, and then there was no food or fluid in the morning. And then when you come out, I couldn't feel my face for about 12 hours. I think by the time I went to bed, which was close to midnight on Friday, I still couldn't really feel from my cheekbone down from the whatever the thing is that knocks out your nerves. So yeah, I was really having a hard time even getting hydrated. And I know going into that surgery too, I was a little bit nervous because I had probably knocked out 3 liters of fluid by 1 o'clock on my normal day. So because I hadn't, I was worried about the anesthesia or like getting the IV put in, because I felt like I was so dehydrated, and she had a really hard time getting everything in. This arm she tried, and it was so painful and so uncomfortable. She ended up taking it out and then had to call in another nurse to put this side in. But I'm like so bruised and beat up after that, and I don't know whether that's normal or not, but yeah, I struggled for the rest of the day to stay hydrated and get anything in. So I think I like forced down some ratio yogurt. I had 2 yogurts and then like one of those Fairlife protein drinks, and that was probably about it for that day. So pretty light, but understandably sorry. And again, I had no expectations for the weekend, but I was feeling really good. So I didn't go for any planned walks or anything Saturday. It was just kind of a lazy day around the house, really, just kind of watch some TV. And I still was able to get in 1,400 calories that day. I definitely paid a bit more attention to my nutrition, you can see here. And just kind of trying to get caught back up on what I missed out on from Friday, as I didn't really want to be in a deficit because I'm trying to make sure, number one, that I get good wound healing, that I've got enough, you know, nutrients coming through to support recovery and that inflammatory process and my immune function. And I didn't want to be, you know, coming out of that then also feeling really tired and fatigued either. So I wanted to make sure that I could keep my energy levels up so that when I was finally healed, I was in a good place to kind of get back in to lifting. So I was able to go out for dinner on one of these nights. I think I had, we picked soft food and kind of waited for it to cool down. So I had pasta at a restaurant. And I guess I had one of those, what are they called? It's like the 0 proof cocktails. So I wanted something cold. So I got this like margarita slushy without the alcohol. And was just like, oh, this is so nice. So yeah, I enjoyed some pasta, just cutting everything up into like little bites, and still had a reasonable date night, which was fun. But you can see they're very low fiber, and that's just because like chewing like lettuce and salads or anything that's super fibrous was just not going to go the way that I would want to for a recovery. And then you also have to avoid like nuts and seeds and just anything that can kind of get trapped back there. So yeah, it was an interesting couple of days with food choices. But for training this past week, I got in, it looks like 2 resistance training sessions. I got 2 runs in, so my activity levels are a little bit lower this week. So I do expect my weight to kind of come back up as a result, which I think you can even see over here. Yeah, so on my weigh-in this morning, I was at 134. So I think combination of some swelling, I can definitely feel it in my cheeks. I woke up this morning, I'm like, oh, it's a little worse than Saturday. But just less movement. Yeah, I'm kind of not surprised to see that up. So yeah, I'll keep taking the next few days off, but I'm going to go for a walk tonight and probably get my walks back up and running, but they'll just be 30 to 45 minutes. I don't need to do the long ones anymore. It's really just to get out, enjoy some fresh air, walk my dog, and it's good for my mental health. So yeah, that's kind of the last couple of weeks of data. If we come over to have a look at what my plans are for this week, just so that you guys know like what I will be shooting for my off-season nutrition. As I anticipate, my activity will come down quite a bit for at least my steps, because I'm quite sedentary normally and I don't want to do the 1 hour commitment every single day to walking. My energy expenditure is going to go down. So my goal is to kind of stay around this 18-20, and I think that's probably going to keep my weight, I don't know, somewhere between 131 and 135. That would be like my normal buffer. So I've got like a 5-pound range that I'm more than happy to sit within, like in this off season. And I may end up kind of dipping a little bit higher than that, depending on what calories I've had, what foods I've consumed. And none of that bothers me. I really don't pay too much attention to the scale. I'm more concerned with how am I performing when I'm in the gym? Has my hormones recovered? I'll go and get my blood work and see how they're doing in a couple of weeks' time. And am I doing the right things necessary to optimize muscle growth? And that's putting a little bit of body fat back on, so I'm happy with that. And am I getting enough protein in and enough calories to sustain like high energy, good workouts? So you can see my protein's going to stay around this 120 range, and I will try to stay around that as best as I can. But there are probably going to be days where I'm a little bit higher. I might go up to as high as 22, 23. Again, I'm probably not going to continue to track as meticulously once I kind of get out of this this first 4 weeks or so. I just want to see where my natural appetite kind of falls, what foods are working for me, what I'm enjoying, and kind of stay around those numbers. So I'll keep my 4 resistance training sessions in. I'm going to continue to do my 3-mile runs, and I actually would love to like work up to maybe a 5. So I think this weekend I'll get up early before it gets too hot, and just do a slow. I'm going to try and avoid looking at my watch, because I usually look at my minute mile paces, and that kind of picks up my speed if I'm going a little slow. So I'm going to do like an untracked, just run for distance, so that you can get through 5 miles. And I might even try for a 7, at some point over the next couple of weeks. But I just, it's so beautiful outside and I have the place to do it. So that's going to be really fun. Steps are going to be kind of within a pretty big range here, 8 to 12. I suspect that it'll probably end up being on the lower end once kind of work is back into the swing of things and I'm kind of more weeks away from my competition. But yeah, that's kind of what I am going to be doing for the next foreseeable several weeks. But again, there'll be a lot of flexibility with those numbers. I just want to point out 18-20 may sound quite low to some of you guys, but please remember I'm so sedentary. On a normal day when I'm not thinking about exercise and I'm just working, I might do 3,000 or 2,000 steps. So I'm just very inactive. So coming across to your questions, I know last week, like I said, you guys had some really great questions and you wanted to know a little bit more. So I want to go through those right now with you and give you some feedback. So the first question that has been asked here is training every day the best way to make gains if it fits your lifestyle? So I think the answer kind of depends. And there are several variables that I would encourage people to think about. There are certainly going to be some folks where you have the ability to train every day, and maybe you have the lifestyle like set up to allow you to do that. I know for me, I can't because of my work schedule, but in another lifestyle or lifetime, maybe I probably would consider that. I do like doing a little bit of movement each day. So if that allows you to train more frequently and actually spread your volume out through the week, remember that is a key driver for muscle growth. So up until a certain point, of course, we've seen, really high volume studies that don't necessarily lead to superior growth adaptations. And I don't know that the research is crystal clear yet, like where that cutoff really is. I think we just need more data with better controlled studies where there is a control group and maybe a study that's got a higher number of participants so that we've got better data and analytics. But I think that it can allow you to get more volume in. So rather than doing, let's say you are currently trying to squeeze in all of your training into like 3 or 4 days, that can be really exhausting. So I think if spreading out your workouts so that they're a little bit shorter, and maybe you do 6 more manageable workouts, I think that that is also a perfectly reasonable way to do things, provided that that is a way that you can stay consistent and that it fits with your lifestyle. Again, thinking about long-term progress, whatever you can do consistently that allows you to get in enough volume to achieve the weekly growth on the muscles that you care about, then that's great. Do what you need to do. So I think some situations though where we might want to reconsider that is, well, number one, not everybody's going to have a schedule that permits them to train every day, or maybe you don't want to train every day. I know for me, I like to have days out of the gym. It's a nice reset, a refresh, and it kind of leaves me feeling excited to get back in on other days. But please consider, your fatigue levels. You don't want to be going in every day like all out, an RPE 10. I would highly recommend varying the training intensity. So you might have a combination of high, light, and maybe moderate days. And that might be that some of the leg days are heavier days than the upper body days, just so that it's not go, really high intensity all the time. I'd still consider like managing your sleep, thinking about stress, thinking about your nutrition, like all of those things are still really important, in context of how you set up your training schedule. So I think that's really important to consider as well. And then the other thing that I would encourage people to think about is injury risk. So if you're training every day and you're really pushing high volume, just keep in mind that that could potentially increase your risk of an injury. So you really need to listen to your body in those circumstances and just make sure that you are still lifting with good technique. And if you are feeling sore, you would probably like to reduce the intensity or the volume in some way, so that you're not going in feeling, like you're at increased risk of injury. And just remember as well, if you are training every day and you're feeling sore constantly, there's also the possibility that you're actually now no longer training the muscle group intended at the intensity that's necessary to actually successfully activate and fatigue all of those motor units within that muscle. So now your training's becoming potentially less effective. So I guess the bottom line here is, if you want to train every day of the week, you can in theory, but I wouldn't be going from like a low volume or a low frequency to every day overnight. You'd have to work up to that. Otherwise you will be unbearably sore. And again, the risk of injury would be very high. So it would be something that you would want to gradually work up to. And please listen to your body's feedback and make the necessary adjustments to your training just to make sure that you don't injure yourself. Okay, so next question. Somebody had asked me, what is my preferred suit brand? So I work with Angel Competition Bikinis. So since transitioning across from the WBFF to the IFBB, I've worked with them and they've exclusively done all of my suits. And they are not located in Tampa or Florida, but they've been so easy to work with when it comes to kind of getting your suits adjusted and to collect all of your information. I must have 30 different suits sitting around. They've got so many different types of materials and practice bikinis and things, and they send you out an amazing kit with everything that you need basically. And they of course have all of the contacts for earrings and shoes and things like that. So if you are a competitor, I do have a discount code with Angel Competition Bikinis. It's Holly15, and I believe you get 15% off your order if you use my code. So I really love their stuff. It's great. Someone asked, is this going to be your first build or bulk since 2017? So no, I've done many builds over the years. I'd say some have been more aggressive than others. My most aggressive one was during COVID in 2020. I didn't really have a whole lot going on, and I was able to really focus on it, and I enjoyed my time, in the gym, and I was eating a lot more. So that was probably my build where I put on the most amount of body fat. I'd say I was up by probably close to 30 pounds. I think it was a successful building phase, but I also felt, my health suffered in other ways. And I think just from a cardiovascular standpoint, I completely took out all of my cardio, my walks, and I do regret doing that. I think if I were to reflect on that build, I wasn't as fit, and I remember walking up and down stairs not feeling very, physically fit. I don't know that I could have run, and I didn't enjoy, how my health felt. And though I wasn't measuring my blood at that period of time, I would have to imagine that there'd probably be some things that were outside the normal reference ranges. I just didn't feel very healthy. I'd probably put on more body fat than I even needed to be optimal for muscle growth. So I have done a heavy build back in 2020. And since then, I think my builds have all been a little bit more conservative. So, I've taken my body fat percentage back up to maybe 20% in 2021, 20% in 2022. And it's only been in the last 2 years where I haven't really needed to put on major muscle, like across all muscle groups, where I felt like I needed to do a heavy build like that anymore, since I'm just kind of focusing on one muscle group. I've really tried to optimize my training and be very specific with my workout plan to get as much growth as I can. So the last 8 weeks is probably an exception. I've been doing it at a very lean physique, but I still did get some growth simply because I really focused on my training program. So I had that hyper-focused glute program that had, I think, probably around 50 sets in total per week across the 2 different glute muscles. So again, that's sitting at the higher end of what we probably know is necessary for muscle growth, and I did get some good muscle growth in that time period. So I don't know that I need to sit at a really high body fat percentage anymore because I'm not trying to grow everything. I will be obviously getting back into a glute focused program. I already have a brand new program which I'll be putting up and making available for you guys soon. I just put another one up a couple of days ago actually on the website, which is the Bikini Blueprint, which is a little bit more balanced. It's probably how I would train if I wasn't going to be diving back into comps next season. Somebody else says, which program of mine will build shoulders as fast as possible? I would say that the glutes and shoulders program series would be a really good one, hence the name. The Miss Bikini Olympia series also is a heavy focused shoulder program. I think there's still probably close to 30 sets every week on the shoulders, and it's usually relatively balanced between each of the heads. Or my hyper-focused glute program. Despite the name, that still had a similar high volume on shoulders. It's just that program was just those 2 muscle groups. So if you're looking for a more balanced program, I would say the glutes and shoulders might get you a couple of other chest and back exercises. Whereas as you kind of go into the Miss Bikini Olympia series, it's getting a little bit more focused on glutes and shoulders. And then obviously the hyper-focused program, it's so glute focused with very little of anything else, but the shoulders still get a really good amount of volume. So those would be the ones that I would recommend. Someone asked me what my final stage weight was. So I didn't weigh myself on show day, but the day before I was about 128 pounds. So I'm 5'8", 171 centimeters, I think. That's what I hopped on stage at. And I don't know my body fat percentage from show day. I did take an in-body scan for what it's worth a few days prior to that, and I was probably just sitting under 10% body fat. Someone else asked, why did I switch from figure to bikini? So I think if you were to look at the current Miss Figure Olympia, the lovely Sydney Gill, she has an amazing physique. I'll put a video up now so that you can see her. So stunning. She is tiny as well, like much shorter than I. She has like beautiful aesthetic. I wouldn't say she has a long spine like I do, but when you look at her, I mean, if I'm going to do a competition, I want to be at the top. The amount of muscle mass that she has that you can see right here, that is an enhanced physique. So I'm not enhanced and I don't want to go in that direction. Just for a couple of reasons. Certainly no judgment on anybody who chooses to do that, each to their own. It's a sport, it's kind of known for that. But I don't necessarily want to have to wear the mass of muscle. And then also when you see that kind of muscle mass in an off season, where you're sitting back at a normal, healthier body fat percentage as a female, it's just a much bigger body. And I don't personally like that look in the off season. It looks phenomenal on stage. But when you start to move and venture back towards a healthier body fat percentage for females, I wouldn't feel as comfortable kind of walking around and maintaining that level of muscle mass in my off season. So that's kind of why I decided to opt to go back to bikini, just because it was a smaller, more manageable physique, I think, like year round. Obviously, there's night and day differences in our physiques here. It's very impressive. So yeah, that's the reason why I dropped back to bikini. Someone then asks, do mini cuts help during a build to keep things tight? So I guess first things first, just mini cuts in general. This is something that I've made many videos on. So if you go back to like my YouTube channel and type in Holly and mini cuts, you will see lots of videos on these subjects from like 2017, 18, 19. I probably should do an updated version of them. But anyhow, they're still great videos, still accurate to this day. But they're not essential in a building phase. I think they're a really helpful and useful tool, especially if your goal is to maintain maybe a leaner look during a build. But I will say, staying too lean is probably going to be disadvantageous to you at a certain point. Like I said in my most recent, like short 8-week window when I was trying to build muscle, that is not an ideal body fat percentage to try and build muscle on. It's very fortunate that I did. It was just because my program was so hyper focused that I was able to get some growth. But if I was doing a more balanced program where I was hitting all muscle groups, and maybe just achieving, I don't know, a mid-teen kind of weekly set number on all muscle groups, it's probable that I probably wouldn't have grown. So it certainly can be a tool if you like the idea of staying lean, but I don't want to encourage people to do it if your ultimate goal is to build muscle, because I think having either a slight surplus and having a little bit of body fat available is a helpful thing. But I also can empathize with the desire to stay at a slightly leaner physique, because I think it can help with motivation, it can help with confidence, and I think it also helps with tracking your visual progress a little bit more clearly too, like how much have I actually accomplished. Though I don't know that it's necessary more than like 20 weeks after a building phase. I wouldn't be doing it like 10 weeks into a build, you're like, all right, time to do a mini cut, let's reveal all of those gains. You're not going to see a whole lot. We've talked previously about what realistic rates of growth are. And when we're talking, 2 or 3 millimeters over 12 weeks, there is very little point of you cutting down to reveal your new muscle, with that kind of short time frame. So, I don't know that I would personally be recommending doing them more than every, 2 to 4 months. But, if you've gained an appreciable amount of body fat, then maybe, you could do that to help with motivation and just staying kind of consistent with your training. And the other thing that it might help with, I just was looking at a note here that I had, it might help with your insulin sensitivity and glucose utilization. So if you've been somebody who, like me, back in 2020, pulled out all cardio to really focus on lifting, I know that my cardiovascular fitness would have or did decrease. Even though I didn't get my blood work done, I know that I would have seen some negative changes to my blood sugar levels and just nutrient petitioning. So I think if you'd like to reintroduce some HIIT cardio during your building phase, that could potentially be helpful, and it might lead to a small drop in body fat on the scale. But I think just from a health perspective, it could potentially have some benefits there from insulin sensitivity standpoint and just glucose utilization in general. So I hope that gives you some perspective. I don't personally use them a whole lot. I usually kind of come out and I'm happy to stay within a range in my off season. And then I kind of dial it back in, when I'm going to a competition or a specific event. Next question. Someone asks, do I track chewing gum? The answer is no. I actually don't chew a lot of gum, to be honest. I probably have like a piece here and there. So it's not really a sufficient amount of calories for me to even be worth to spend the time tracking them. But generally speaking, like most gum probably has 5 calories or like 1 gram of carbohydrate. So if you're only having a couple of pieces a day, it's contributing negligible amounts of energy. But I do know of individuals, I've had several clients actually over the years kind of say, oh my gosh, I almost go through a full pack of chewing gum a day when I'm dieting, which to me is like, why would you do that? I can think of so many better ways to spend 20 calories, if you're down to the wire. But, if you are only having 100 grams of carbs and you're choosing to have 10 pieces of chewing gum a day, 10 grams of carbs, that's 10% of your daily intake. But, it could become meaningful and it might kick somebody out of a deficit that's on very low calories. But for me personally, I would much rather eat whole foods and maybe portion myself like a larger salad or more veggies for volume over just chewing gum, throughout the day. So that's not really a habit that I've ever had, thankfully. But you can kind of see there might be different scenarios when tracking gum might be important. But I would probably say if you're having more than a few pieces of gum a day, even in a diet phase, I would say that there are probably better things or strategies that you could do to help with hunger or meet your calorie targets than chewing gum. Okay, next question. Does running affect your muscle growth? So I think just in light of my, recent reintroduction of running, and there's been a lot of comments and just questions about, well, how are you going to grow your legs? How are you going to grow your quads? Doesn't running blunt muscle growth? And there's a lot of conversation around this. So I really appreciate this question. So if we look at the concurrent research, running, based on the studies that I have read, actually causes very little interference with your muscle growth outcomes. Again, I think this all exists across the spectrum, and I may have answered this in previous videos, but generally speaking, the research that looks at concurrent training, where we've got, someone doing resistance trainings a few times a week and then running a few times a week, the frequency in most studies is usually 2 to 4 sessions a week. The duration of these studies are usually around 6 to 12 weeks. Most of the resistance training is either full body or it might be a lower body focused program. They're doing 60 to 80% of their 1 rep max, and they're focusing on 3 to 4 sets of 8 to 12 reps. So it's probably applicable to many of our training programs. I'd say for me, my volume is probably a little bit higher than kind of what's being described here, just based on the frequency and then the number of sets here that they're talking about. And then that's usually paired with a similar frequency for running, so 2 to 4 sessions a week. The duration is between 20 and 45 minutes, or about 180 minutes max a week. And it's usually moderate intensity steady state at around 60 or 75% of the VO2 max. So that's how studies are usually carried out. So this obviously doesn't apply to everybody's running schedules. For example, I work with a lot of women that are doing like half marathons, or they might be doing Ironman, but they also have a little, workout session per week for their muscle growth goals. So, for someone like that, I mean, that's extreme cardio. That's many, many hours, sometimes 5 hours a day, just on the riding component. And then that's followed up with a 1 hour run or a swim. So, that's really taken out of context and wouldn't be applicable to what I'm about to tell you. So that's how research is generally done. And based on a recent 2016 study, and I think I did a review of this on my YouTube channel. So if you wanted to go and look up concurrent training and type in my name, you will find this particular study. But this was by Fife and colleagues. It was an 8-week study. They compared 3 different groups. One group did resistance training only. There was a group that did resistance training and then high intensity interval training. And then there was a resistance training group that did moderate intensity continuous training. And they used direct measures of muscle growth. So they used ultrasound, which is good. And the muscle growth outcomes were the same between all of the groups. So again, across the spectrum, there's probably going to be a gray area where you start to do too much and you probably do start to see some interference effect with muscle growth. But at these kind of lower frequencies, lower durations, moderate intensity, it doesn't seem to be too problematic. And I mean, I can attest as an N of 1 that just doing a couple of times a week has not interfered in any way with my resistance training. But I will say, generally, I do limit it to 2 to 3 sessions a week. I don't do anything more than 20 or 30 minutes of running, though I might start to do a little bit more. But if I were to do that, I would be very smart about when I'm doing those sessions. I'd be doing them on my non-lifting days, or at the very least, I would be doing my training in the morning, and then I would give several hours so that I can refuel, rest, and then go and have an effective, enjoyable run. So that's my summary, I guess, there of concurrent training and running. Someone asked, when will your app be back up and running, and will it have warm-up set features? It'll be back up and running very soon. I had a call with my dev team on Friday last week, and they've already rebuilt out everything. It's just not on, I guess, the platform that I'm building it on, or the hosting platform. It was just set up locally on their database. So they're basically just showing me how it will visually look, and that they've got all the components together. So that's really exciting. I'm guessing probably another 10 weeks and we will be done. It took a few weeks for us to kind of find the right development group to, I guess, start rebuilding the app, obviously, with the previous experiences, we did a lot more due diligence and background checks to make sure that we weren't going to be working with criminals. Yeah, I'm so excited. And you asked about the warm-up feature. So basically, in previous versions of the app, we had a tab that you could click on where if you wanted to know how to do a warm-up for your squats, you go and click on that tab and it would tell you set 1, you're going to do 5 reps and it's going to be at this weight. Based on something that you'd previously answered for us, it would tell you what the load needed to be, and it's usually based on a percentage of your 1 rep max. And then it would say set 2, you're going to do 3 reps and this is the weight that you're going to do. So yes, my goal is to have that again in this app. And of course, we're working on the nutrition as well. Now, it's not going to launch with the training, but the nutrition coach will be up and running hopefully by the end of the year, which is so exciting. Next question, and this might be the last question. What happens to you once you consume more carbohydrate than your body can store? So this is a wonderful question. I appreciate this person, as I think a lot of folks are, I guess, generally terrified of eating carbs. They've heard all of these horror stories and that you eat too many carbs and it will just turn to body fat. So I think straight off the bat, the only reason that you would gain body fat is if you are eating above your current maintenance calories. So you need to be in a calorie surplus to gain body fat. And the same would be true for consuming too much alcohol. A lot of people have asked, well, if I drink alcohol, is that immediately turned to body fat? The answer is no. The only time you'll ever store body fat is if you are in a surplus of calories. So that's my first, I guess, general comment here. But when you have more carbohydrates than your body needs, generally speaking, it's going to cause your blood sugar levels to rise. That's only temporary. Sorry, that's in response to insulin being released to take glucose into your muscles or to any of the cells that need it. But if those muscle cells or your liver stores are already full and you're eating in a surplus, then what usually happens is that your body can start to convert that excess carbohydrate into fat, and that process is called de novo lipogenesis, or DNL. That pathway, though, is rather inefficient. So what generally happens is instead of that carbohydrate being turned into fat through de novo lipogenesis, instead your body will preferentially use those carbohydrates as fuel, and then it will take any fat that you consumed through your diet and it will store those as triglycerides. Or it will prevent the breakdown of triglycerides into free fatty acids to be used as fuel. So it'll kind of keep those there, and instead it will just utilize carbohydrates. So again, the only scenario where you would gain body fat is if you are eating in a surplus. If you're eating at maintenance, you might see an even switch of fat usage and glucose usage. Sometimes it depends on the type of movement that you're doing. Some people are just geared, naturally to burn more carbohydrate or more fat. If we look at various metabolism studies, you can kind of see the different fuel usages between individuals. But what will govern fat gain is the calorie surplus. So I hope that answers that question. If you eat too many carbs, it won't all be able to be stored as glycogen in your muscle or liver. It will and can be converted into dietary fat, or your body will just switch, its primary use of fuel to carbohydrate, and the fat will be stored instead. So I think that was the last question for today. I know there are lots more. I hope those answers are helpful. But if you've got questions for my next check-in, please, by all means, drop me a comment. I am very excited to be kind of taking it a little bit easier this week. And it's also going to give me an opportunity to think about lots of other fun programs to put together as well. So, I guess that's all for this week, guys. If you're interested in one-on-one coaching, make sure that you check the links in the description below. If you'd like to get access to any of my workout programs, those can also be found in the links in the description. If you've got questions about nutrition or training, go and check out our free resources on the website. I have lots and lots and lots of articles that are all free. We have great free lead magnets, lots of resources. I have my books, recipes, everything is there available for you on our website. So you are certainly not short of access to all of that information. So I will see you in my next video, guys. Bye.